Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. In today's episode of the Interview Tea, we are discussing Goa Institute of Management. So this was one of my first interviews. In fact, the first one where I went in through the Achievers round, which is not based off on your CAT scores but instead on your profile. It is either that you are very meritorious in your academics or you have a lot of achievements and awards in any other co-curricular fields or a mix of both. Since I reached a little earlier, they made me go first in the panels. So there was a very short process. They just told us to arrange all the documents in a given order. We went there, we had our documents verified, and then post lunch of the panelists, we started getting in. And since I had gone earlier and my sequence was first in some particular panel, I was one of the first people to get into the interview rooms. So there were two interviews. One was the regular round and other was the spot round. So the people who qualified after the regular round were only allowed for the spot round, and just after the spot round they decide whether to give you the spot admission letter or not. So when I went in for my first interview, the panelists told me to wait 2 minutes outside. So I was waiting for a queue to enter, or I was standing there for 2 minutes and I thought that should I enter now or not, but the volunteer very kindly told me that no, they would give you a queue to enter the room. And once they called me, I went in. There were two panelists, a male and a female, and they were really cool, and they just sat me down. They were like, okay, sit. And the first question they asked me, so where have you come from? So there was no proper formal introductions. So I said, I'm from Nagpur. They were like, oh, okay. And then I thought maybe this is my cue to start. And then I started that I did my schooling in Nagpur, and then after I moved to Bangalore for my bachelor's, and then I started continue my a little prepared introduction. And after that, they suddenly started asking me about very general things. So in my introduction, I mentioned that I was doing a lot of business fests and management consulting in my introduction. So they asked me that why do you want to do management consulting as a career? And then they asked me, what do you think that a management consultant should have? And don't you think that AI would replace the job of management consultants? And then we had a slight discussion on this, and the whole conversation shifted to AI. So now this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because the open source AI is something that I use a lot. So I also mentioned how I used those AI tools in my fitness journey all along these 6 months, and how I use AI in fashion. So the female panelist got a lot interested in how I use AI in fashion, and then I told her how I have made some particular prompts that work on fashion basis and how is it used to make money. Then we went on talking about it, and after that we moved to the darker part of the fashion world, wherein we spoke about so I was asked that there are a lot of companies like bigger brands who actually exploit the workers in their factories, and they source their clothes at a very very cheap cost and then sell them at exorbitantly high prices. So what is your take on it? So I firstly mentioned about how the industry works, and about why there needs to be so much of margin, and how the luxury brand image works. And after that, they wanted to capture me into a situation where they kept telling me that I am exploiting the people. If I am the CEO, why am I exploiting those people? So I had to clarify that I am not exploiting the people. I am directly dealing with factories in smaller countries, and those factories are dealing with their employees. So even if today I sit here and want to say something, I cannot do as much as I cannot make statements and I cannot make decisions for people working in their factories, because I am not dealing with the employees. It is their factory owner who has to look into the working conditions. So I did not say it so bluntly. I sugarcoated a lot of it. And then we had a good AI discussion again after that, like for other 5 to 6 minutes. And then sir looks at my profile and he says that, okay, you have good academics, so let's skip academics. And I'm looking at him, I was like, okay, fine, sir. Then sir asked me about, what do you think, if I give you, let us say, some money today, what would you suggest? Since you are finance and investment major, tell me where would you start putting your money in? And back at that time, the commodities were doing really good when this interview happened, and so I spoke about mutual funds and how ETFs of commodities work, and some other things, and we spoke about it a little bit. And then he asked me more about some situations wherein I showed my leadership skills. So I mentioned some examples from my college days, from my associations, and they asked me about, are there any challenges that you face? So I did tell them I managed to present myself even when my presentation was completely changed by the event managers, because it was a business fest and it was done for me to think on my feet, and I gave them that example. So they were pretty happy about it. And post that, we talked a little bit about what's happening in the world, and they the interview went on around 15 to 20 minutes, and they were like, okay, thank you, it was nice speaking to you, we will let you know. And then I went out, I sat outside, and a lot of people sitting there were discussing that what had happened. And then one guy came, one volunteer, one of the students who was in their first year, came out and said that announce the results of people who had to go to the next round. So fortunately I was one of them, and then I went to the next panel. So I could easily sense the difference between the first and the second panel. The first panel was a lot more chiller, because the second panel was a little intimidating. The table was a lot bigger. The two professors were very serious, and they were speaking very slowly, and they were like, yeah, Misha, come sit. And I went and I sat there, and they asked me, tell me about yourself. And then I told them about a lot of things. So they questioned me about my internship, they asked me about my academics, they asked me about basketball, they asked me about dance. We used the acronym GIM. I mentioned GYM by mistake, and then the first thing he did was he cut me out and said, we don't call it GYM, we call it GIM. And I, even though I was scared, I just smiled it off. I was like, yes sir, I'm sorry, GIM. And then I started speaking again. And after that, it was a 15 to 20 minute conversation again. So it was a very conversational interview, both of them. And then he just took out the file, and then he just asked me, how much did you score? And since my scores were above the threshold limit required even to get in through achievers round, he signed my spot admission letter, and he was like, congratulations, we enjoy talking to you. Now the ball is in your court, it is your decision to make. So overall it was a good experience. The management was really good, and there were very clear communications, so hats off on that, because a lot of interview processes confuse you, but this was a fairly simpler and a fun one. I was asked really good questions all through my interview process, and everybody was very sweet. So that is about it in the video, and thank you so much, and I'll get back to you in the next video.